Hey everyone, welcome back. Shout out to Heather who's celebrating a birthday today. Hope you have a great one. Looking at today's lesson, we're going to actually combine some multiple ideas. Last unit, we were graphing quadratics or parabolas. And then this unit, we've been doing factoring and FOIL or distributed property. Today, we're going to combine those ideas and see how they're actually related to each other. So there's a note sheet on factoring polynomials and zeros. So if you open that up, let's take a look. And kind of just from an exploration standpoint, looking at the graph on the right, we want to find the vertex. And we know the vertex is that highest or lowest point, depending on if it opens up or down. So if we look, there is the vertex, and that's at the point 1, -4. The x-intercepts we know are where the graph crosses the x-axis. So if we're looking right here, it's at -1, 0, and over here at 3, 0. And then our y-intercept is where the graph hits the y-axis, which is right here at 0, -3. So we did that last unit. There was no big deal with that. Everyone was pretty solid with that. And then now we've been doing factoring. So if we're trying to factor this trinomial, the little diamond or X method, there's a 1 out in front. So it's like 1 times -3. That number goes right here. And then this number, our b, goes right here. So we're thinking in our heads, what two numbers multiply to be -3 that add up to be -2? So that's going to be a +1 and a -3. So each of those are over just the 1x or x. So our factors, if we look at these kind of on its side, it would be 1x and a +1. So x and a +1. And then for the other one, it's our 1x and a -3. So it's a 1x -3. So you kind of look at it on its side. So when you factor it, you get x + 1 times x - 3. Now what I want to do is take those factors and set them equal to 0. So we got an x + 1 equal to 0. So we don't need those parentheses. And if we go to solve this, I would subtract 1 on both sides, and you get x equals -1. Our other factor, x - 3 equal to 0, we don't need the parentheses. And if we go to solve, we would add 3 to both sides, and we're getting x equals 3. Do you notice any sort of connection with what our x-intercepts were and what we got when we set equal to 0? When you're solving and setting equal to 0, what you're actually doing is finding the x-intercepts, or they're also called your zeros. So how do these compare? The solutions, when you set the factors equal to 0, are your x-intercepts. And then the next one, it's saying, how could you find the x-coordinate of the vertex using the x-intercepts or the zeros? So because we had the graph, we already looked, the vertex is going to be at 1, -4. So we want to say, how do we find that 1, -4 just based on the x-intercepts? Well, if you think back to last unit, we had talked about this axis of symmetry. We know there's a mirror image on both sides. Well, the distance from that line to the x-intercept and the distance to the x-intercept are exactly the same. So what we're finding is the point that is directly in the middle of our x-intercepts. And how do we find that? You take the average. So if we look at our solutions of x equals -1 and x equals +3, we would add those two numbers up and divide by 2, because we're finding what is directly in the middle of those. So when we do that, -1 + 3 is 2. We're dividing by 2, so we're getting 1. Well, we knew our vertex was going to be at 1. How do we get -4? We have to plug that number back into the original equation, which was x squared minus 2x minus 3. So we're plugging 1 in for that. So 1 squared minus 2 times 1 minus 3. 1 squared is 1. Minus 2 times 1 is a minus 2. And then a minus 3. 1 minus 2 is -1. -1 minus 3 is -4. And that's what we knew we were going to get as the vertex. So I want you to really notice using the factors to find the x-intercepts, and then know that the vertex is directly in the middle of that. And then to find the y value of it, you plug it right back in. So a possible equation in factored form is what our factors were. So it was x + 1 and x - 3. So y equals x + 1, x - 3. We know it's going to be a positive out in front because the parabola was opening up. Now let's look at the second one. We have the graph on the right. Find the vertex. We see it's right up here at -1, 9. The x-intercepts are here at -4, 0 and 2, 0. Y-intercept is right up here at 0, 8. And then it has us factor. So because there's that negative x squared out in front, you actually want to factor that -1 out. So if we pull a -1 out, we're getting x squared plus 2x minus 8. So we're thinking, what two numbers multiply together to be a -8 that add up to be a +2? And those numbers would be a +4 and a -2. Those are going to be each over 1x. So our factors are an x + 4 and an x - 2. Now, because we have that -1 out front, it's still going to have a -1 out in front. And we know all that does is make our graph open down, which if you saw on the right, it does open down. So set each factor equal to 0 and solve. So x + 4 equals 0. Subtract 4 from both sides, and you're getting x equals -4. We knew we were getting a x-intercept of -4. That checks out. If we set x - 2 equal to 0, add the 2 to both sides, and we're getting x equals 2. We knew that we were going to get an x-intercept of 2. How do these values compare? We had said they're going to be the same as the x-coordinates of your x-intercepts. So the zeros, your solutions, x-intercepts, they're all the same thing. How do you find the vertex from those? We take the average, or we find the point that is directly in the middle of them. So -4 plus 2 divided by 2. We get -2 over 2, which is -1. To find the y value, we plug that back into the original. So the original was -x squared minus 2x plus 8. So this, you got to be a little careful. There's that negative out in front, and then you are squaring -1, then -2 times -1, and then plus 8. So following PEMDAS, order of operations, -1 squared is 1, but then there's the negative out in front. We have a -2 times a -1, that's a positive 2, and then we have a plus 8. -1 plus 2 plus 8 gives you a positive 9, and that's what we got for our vertex of -1, 9. So there's going to be some homework posted. I'm going to have you submit that tomorrow, so make sure you get that done. And just to kind of summarize what we talked about today, how do you find the x-intercepts from a quadratic equation? You factor it, and then you set each of those factors equal to 0 and solve. How do you find the vertex? You take the average, or the middle between those two x-intercepts, substitute that number into the equation in order to find the y value. And then we hadn't sketched any of these because we already had them, but if we wanted to do the sketch, you want to then use your vertex, plot that point, your x-intercepts and your y-intercept, connect them to make a U-shaped parabola. There's also a sheet that's labeled practice. Take a look at those. Here are the solutions to them. So I would want you to work them out on your own and then just check your answers here. And then there's a second one as well. So check those, do some practice, do the homework, submit, and as always, contact me.